Well, sit back and enjoy a New Year's show full of resolutions to save you money. First up, be it resolved, no more bailouts. As the individual Obamacare mandate kicks in, new worries popping up that insurance companies will need a government rescue from Obamacare. Here's a big reason why. So far, nearly 3 times as many health plans getting canceled as the number of folks actually signing up, and evidence that those who are signing up are not the ones that insurance companies need to break even. This news coming as we discovered that our great American auto bailout was actually more about bailing out foreign car companies than about saving the U.S. auto industry. Fiat took a 100% stake in Chrysler this week for just a fraction of the money that Americans originally paid into the Chrysler bailout. So is all this evidence that it's time to stop bailouts for good? Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Bill Baldwin, Elizabeth McDonald, Sabrina Schaeffer, Rick Unger, and John Tamny. So, Steve, stop all bailouts.
David, it's got to be done, but sadly, it's not going to be done this year. This is going to be violated. The insurance companies are in bad shape. You outline the reasons why. And they have this thing called risk corridors in that crazy legislation, will give the government the discretion, in their view, to give money to companies that they think need it. So this thing is already happening.
And, Rick, didn't we just find out with the auto bailout, with Fiat buying up all of Chrysler, that these bailouts very often don't work as they originally planned to?
Well, let's make a separation here, because I think I'm not quite on board with what you're all saying about the potential for bailouts in the health insurance law. The risk corridors were programmed in, built in. There are rules governing how they may or may not be used. I am, however, kind of with you. I'm kind of with you on the Fiat thing. I don't mind that we bailed Chrysler out. I think it saved a whole lot of jobs all the way down the chain, but there should have been a provision in that deal that called for the taxpayers to be paid back, plus some interest, before Fiat was allowed to take the company over.
Yeah, well, essentially what they're going to do is bleed Chrysler in order to pay off the losses they have going in Europe. But, Sabrina, let's talk about the coming insurance bailout. Rick is actually right. HHS, which is controlling Obamacare so far, or doing its best to, came out with a rule book in which they predict that there's going to be a $2 billion bailout of insurance companies in 2014 and a $1 billion bailout in 2016 direct from the U.S. Treasury. So there's kind of a bailout written into this thing.
There is, and it's not a good way to start off the new year. Remember, we're only a few days into the new year. I thought the ending, it's a great resolution. And I don't have much sympathy for the health insurance companies. They were given this great opportunity with the individual mandate. And I remember a big headline in Reuters back in 2010, Cigna CEO, don't repeal the health care law. They were pouring money into the Romney campaign and the Obama campaign because they both supported the individual mandate. I have to say that my sympathy only goes so far.
All right. Well, Bill Baldwin, I don't have much sympathy for the insurance companies either, but I have a lot of sympathy for us taxpayers who are going to have to bail them out.
Yeah, but eliminate all bailouts, all safety nets.
Yes.
I wouldn't go quite that far. I think they're deserving recipients. Listen,
like who, for example?
Well, let me take a broader picture look at this. I think wealthy people do have to bail out needy people, but I would not be in favor of taxing successful corporations in order to bail out unsuccessful ones. Nor do I think we should be taxing responsible homeowners in order to bail out spendthrifts next door. Right. But there are deserving recipients, so I'm not going to be
so far I haven't heard you tell me deserving recipients. But, John Tamny, the fact is that 65% of Americans don't want a bailout, and yet it looks like it's coming.
Yeah, governments, as a rule, should never bail out corporations. If we had bailouts 100 years ago, Webvan today would be delivering us groceries on a horse-drawn carriage. When you bail out corporations, you, by definition, rob the economy of its future by propping up the past. And applied to Obamacare insurers, they got in bed with the federal government. We need to let them fail precisely as a signal to future insurers not to get in bed with the federal government.
So, EMAC, as John Tamny points out very rightly, there were no no bailouts for buggy whips, were there?
Yeah, well, we'd be bailing out the horse and buggies, wouldn't we, if this was the way we were doing it back then. We're talking about lemon socialism. That's what we're talking about, bailing out some bad companies. And I have to say, when the government changes the rules, as they did with health reform, basically saying you can keep your catastrophic plan, then that is a built-in bailout for the insurance companies. That is in the law. So what we're talking about is the president and the administration has built this big field of dreams economy. Build it and they will come. And if they don't come, then taxpayers have to foot the bill for the profits that don't come in the door for the insurers. Yeah. Now insurers are too big to fail, along with car companies and the big banks. Now, I'll tell you something. It's something that the Federal Reserve did not step in to buy the bonds from Chrysler or GM.
And see, bottom line is taxpayers ended up paying. We were in the hole for that Chrysler deal. Let's talk about another bailout, though. Hospital bailouts. We got word on Friday, and surprisingly, the New York Times suggesting that all these new Medicaid entries, and the president was bragging about 1 million of them. Guess what? It turns out they like to use hospitals if they can go into hospitals for free. As they lowered the bar for entry to Medicaid, there are going to be a lot more people, 40%, according to this one study, going into hospitals. Hospitals are going to need a bailout, right?
No. Hospitals are going to need a bailout as well. And this whole thing, David, just underscores, beware of governments bearing gifts. Because at the end of the day, they're going to take you over. They're already told insurers if you make too much money on underwriting, they're going to punish you. If you make bad choices, they will reward you. So they're just going to, you may have different names for insurance companies, but they're all going to be USA government.
And EMAC, you ask any doctor, ask a doctor in an emergency room whether the Medicaid patients that come in need to come in. They'll tell you 90% of them don't, but because it's free, not only do they come in, but they very often call up ambulance service at $1,000 a pop to get in because the government pays for it. It's free.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And this has been going on. Doctors have been telling me, and hospital staff have been telling me for decades. This is how the different income brackets understand, especially the lower income bracket, understand health service delivery in this country. If they've been going to the emergency system, that's the way they're going to keep doing it, especially if it's free.
And John Tamny, it leads me to think maybe what's coming is the biggest bailout at all. Well, let me throw this to Sabrina, actually. The biggest bailout of all, of course, is the bailout of Obamacare itself. All of these problems that we're seeing now, won't it reach such a point, such a pitch, at which we're just going to have to say, look, let the government handle it all. We can't bail out everybody.
Well, that's a concerning thought, but I think we all know that the only way to actually stabilize prices is to allow them to fall in an actual marketplace. But what Obamacare is not allowing that, right? Because government keeps interfering, and it has been interfering for 4 decades now, which is why the prices in the healthcare market are so distorted. So, of course, I'd love to see Obamacare fail. I'd love to see real market reforms step in to fill its place. But I'm afraid we might be moving even farther to the left for Democrats try to come in and reform it themselves.
Rick Tamny, I heard you shaking your head no about this report on hospitals. It's right here in your favorite newspaper, the New York Times.
It is, but it's Rick Unger, not Rick Tamny, although I can understand why you would confuse us. We think so much alike.
Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
The Oregon study, you have to look a little closer. It's important. What it did say what you're saying. The thing is, it was a 2-year study. We know in Massachusetts, which is the only sample that we have of where it's been more long-term, same thing happened in the first 2 years until people who gained Medicaid got acclimated to not going to the ER. Since that time,
wait a second,
wait, let me finish my point. I'm going to finish my. I'd like to finish my point.
Quickly.
The use of the ERs dropped in Massachusetts by over 10%.
Okay.
They needed to.
Okay, EMAC, go ahead.
There's Harvard University, there's Boston College, there's Boston universities. There's a lot of universities there where people can also get their care at the universities themselves.
And Steve,
so
there's also the university. Hold on. There's also the University of Common Sense. If you offer something for free to people, they have a tendency to use it more, don't they?
They do indeed, and they end up getting less because the supply does not meet the demand. And when government is involved, you don't get the kind of productivity and innovation that always turns scarcity into abundance. We can do it in healthcare. We've done it in food and everything else. So the quicker we get rid of this thing and no more bailouts, we won't need bailouts.
No more bailouts. Let's leave it at that. Coming up, our next resolution to save taxpayers' money, rein in the power of public unions. If not, help bring down more U.S. cities in 2014. One's reportedly on the brink as we speak. Wait till you hear which one, coming right up. And we are back with the next Forbes New Year's resolution to save you money. Resolved. Rein in the power of public unions. Now, Chicago is the latest city said to be teetering from the cost of its public pensions. They are unfunded by nearly $27 billion. And it's not alone. Most states in the United States are struggling with their own pension problems. So, EMAC, what do we do? How do we rein in the public unions?
Well, it can be done. Chicago, by the way, is in worse shape than Detroit. Wow. And so what you do is you do what the Government Accountability Office has already suggested is going on. And studies show what's going on. Restructure these pensions into 401ks. That's happening in states across the country. Also, lo and behold, Chicago's own City Parks Department said, you know what? No longer can you retire at, get this, age 50. Wow. And also, you have to put more towards your own retirement pot. That is what's going on.
I'd like to put some to my pot. John Tamny, the fact is that this just cannot continue, can it?
Well, I think the better resolution here is to tell cities and states that if they run into insurmountable debt problems, that they will be allowed to default. I mean, to some degree, they can run up these big deficits and fund all sorts of union pensions precisely because investors know that if they can't pay their debt, they won't get burned. If we let investors in city and state get burned, they will be less likely to fund it, and market forces will reign in a very positive way.
Of course, Steve, that would create a huge hole in the economy. I'm wondering, though, how do we rein in the public sector unions right now?
David, I think the very fact that cities are on the brink of a crisis, that ruling in Detroit by a federal judge that said pensions are part of the bankruptcy proceeding, there's no special protection in constitutions, state constitutions, or things like that, is a way that mayors can go and say, as Lizzie suggested, we need 401k type of plans.
And, Rick, I would like to retire at the age of 50. Of course, I didn't risk my life the way that firemen did or the way that police officers did. But, again, some of these deals are bankrupting cities and states. This has got to stop.
Well, look, here's what I'd like to do. I'll sign on to your resolution if you'll sign on to mine, because I agree with you. It's gotten out of hand. We have to do something. But my resolution is to bring some of that power back to the unions in the private sector with new and better leadership, and have someone to stand up for private enterprise workers once again, which we've lost. If you'll go for that, I'm with you on the public sector.
Well, Sabrina, it's not up to me to provide good leadership if the private unions can't provide it for themselves. But the fact is that we have to deal with this crisis now. Otherwise, Chicago's going to go bankrupt just like Detroit did.
No, you're absolutely right. Look, back in 2011, the Journal of Finance found that if you combine all state unfunded liabilities from public employee pension systems, somewhere between $3.2 and $4.4 trillion. Obviously, state budgets cannot handle that, and I think it's something that those firefighters and teachers and policemen ought to, be aware of. The fact is that we want people to be compensated fairly, but governments have been lying. They have been over-promising, and that can't continue.
Yeah, that's right. And there are just a few honest politicians willing to say that, Bill Baldwin.
Well, listen, I wouldn't eliminate all pensions or even disturb the ones that have already been earned, but I do agree with the other panelists here that we need more transparency. So let's freeze the old-style hidden cost pension and put in place a new 401k style pension where you see the dollars going in. Let those dollars, which may be very large for a teacher or a firefighter, let those dollars be very visible to the workers who are earning them, and let them be also very visible to the taxpayers who are paying for them.
Wait, it's beyond transparency. It is called cooking the books. They've been using phony pension math for years in the in government that the private sector doesn't use. Expected rates of return of 10% or more, that's Bernie Madoff territory.
Well, and let me go to Rick on this. Hold on a second. Rick, what is wrong with having public sector unions deal with 401ks like the rest of us do?
Actually, I think, I don't have a big problem with that. I do think that we're being a little bit naive when we try and blame everything and put all of the problems of the cities on the backs of the public unions. There are other issues.
No, but that's the single biggest, I would say. Wouldn't you, Sabrina?
Yeah, I think clearly these numbers suggest that. And one of the big things is we're forgetting the other side of the equation, which are the taxpayers. Taxpayers are supporting this, and they're not seeing this kind of benefits in their own retirement packages. So I think we need to remember that as much as we want to help those public sector employees, there's other hardworking Americans who also want to, benefit from their hard work.
And John Tamny, taxation without representation. People want to have this thing cleaned up.
Yeah, they want to, and I think we've got to say that maybe a few city bankruptcies would be beautiful. I mean, it's got to be remembered that government spending is the big barrier to economic growth because it's government taking from the private sector from the funding of real things. If Chicago goes under, investors get burned and they reappoint their capital to better places.
It might be creative destruction, but beautiful, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if it'd be beautiful. Guys, we got to leave it at that. We're not done with our resolutions, though. How massive snowstorms, record low temperatures, and global warming scientists saved from ice can save us all. So now the final Forbes New Year's resolution to rescue your tax dollars. Resolved, put the global warming agenda on ice. As a large swath of the nation thaws out from brutal temperatures, a new report showing for the first time in 20 years there were more record low temperatures than record highs in the U.S. last year. And did you see this? Scientists looking to document melting ice in the Antarctic getting stuck in a mass of ice. So, Steve, is it time to put the global warming hysteria on ice?
Yes, it is, David. It will save us tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and that's why they've changed global warming now to climate change, as if we don't have weather changes in the last 4 million years. And simply, the fact of the matter is, global warming, David, is simply socialism in drag. Socialism doesn't work, so you bring it back in green of environmentalism. Look at Germany. 3 times the electricity costs we have. We have a clean energy. It's called natural gas. Let it flow.
Okay. Rick, socialism in drag. I've never heard that with regard to this subject.
Neither have I, and I wouldn't be entirely sorry if I didn't hear it again.
You may. Go ahead.
Look, I would actually prefer to change the resolution and call for better science not being tainted by either side of this argument, because you can't deny it's an important issue. I don't want my grandchildren subjected to what could be a very serious problem. But what I do want is good science to tell me more if this is real or if it isn't. I want that.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. And fact is, John, there have been so many different reports, John Tamny. For example, we had the hurricane season, 2013. It was suspected we'd have 3 to 6 major hurricanes here in the Atlantic region. We had none. Back in 2007, I love this, BBC came out with a headline, Arctic Summers Ice-Free by 2013. Well, in fact, the ice sheet in the Arctic grew 29% between 2012 and 2013. So these scientists have been so dead wrong. Should we base billions of our dollars on their wrong forecasts?
No, to steal a line from Steve Forbes, global warming is a massive human delusion. It's left-wing hubris at its worst. If global warming were real, Solyndra would be booming today and ExxonMobil would be going out of business. Ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, do we believe the free markets or do we believe Al Gore? And market signals say that this is a big economy-sapping waste of time.
So, Emac, time to put this waste of time and money on ice.
Well, you know what's terrible? We've already spent a lot of money, right? We had, what was it you were saying at the break, 29 billion?
$26 billion in the stimulus alone on climate change issues.
Meaning on companies like Solyndra that
and
lose.
$7.5 billion of our tax dollars on foreign climate change issues.
What I would say about this is, there's a lot of pollution in the world, and that is terrible. China consumes more coal than all the other countries combined. I'm with Rick Unger on this about the science. I think if utilities are continue to do methane and carbon capture, that's a great thing. Stop pollution in the world.
Sabrina, real quick, go ahead.
Well, look, I don't think the American people think that this is a serious issue anymore. The Pew Research Center always finds that people think of global warming or climate change as the very bottom of their policy priorities. This year, it was the very bottom of 21 different policy priorities. This has become a political issue entirely, and I don't think this is a president who cares much about sensible, economic policy.
And you put your finger on it, Sabrina. Listen to the taxpayers. Listen, it's our money. Coming up, when liberal Michael Moore calls Obamacare awful, why is that awful news for taxpayers? Find out on Cashing In at the bottom of the hour. But first, not all stocks soared last year. And Forbes had the little-known